Hey, what's going on YouTube? Today, we're going to cover the recently reworked mid lane champion, Ryze, the Rune Mage.
A step ahead of Cataclysm.
Alright, so let's quickly look at what Nerf Please said on the new Ryze. So he's gone down all the way to a tier 3 mid, and the new Ryze appears to be very gimmicky and reliant on your team for follow-up. Burst damage is still decent, thank God, but the additional mechanics on his kit appeared to be bit contrary to his usual face roll, and players are not adapting very well. Alright, so by this statement, it sounds like he has a bunch of potential, but people are not playing him correctly yet. Alright, well, let's open up champion.gg and see where he's ranked in mid. So, scrolling down, where's Ryze? Wow, okay, dead last at 46. There he is, rocking that 36% win rate. Don't worry guys, I've played a ton of 6.14 Ryze games, and trust me, he has a lot of potential. I'm sure a lot of you have already seen these win rates and you're kind of thrown off by how crappy Ryze has gotten, but it's because a lot of people are trying the new Ryze and they have no fucking clue what they're doing. It's okay everybody, I've got your back, and today we're going to learn how to play Ryze properly. Alright, so for Ryze, there's a bunch of pros, but being a 36% win rate champion, there's also a lot of cons. So as Nerf Please would suggest, he still deals a ton of damage. This is awesome, because that's what Ryze was really known for, was that late game, high damage. Okay, so he also scales off of his mana, and he has a large mana pool late game. That sounds pretty good. You scale off mana, and you have a lot of it? Awesome. He's also one of the tankiest mages in the game. That's actually a great thing, because a lot of the time you'll get a carry jungler and a carry top laner, and you'll have absolutely no frontline. At least Ryze is still able to fill his niche of being a very tanky mid lane champion that deals a lot of damage. The cons are pretty much the same as the old Ryze, except they're an even bigger issue. He's always been a champion that has pretty damn good wave clear and tends to usually push the lane, which is a problem because he has no reliable escape. Warding properly and knowing how to position are part of the reasons he's so hard to master. He's also got a very weak early game and mana issues early, which are just like the old Ryze, but as long as we do get our tier and our catalyst, we will overcome these issues. Last, of course, is the fact that he struggles against a lot of long-range champions. Stuff like Xerath and Vel'Koz, yep, you're gonna hate them. For our Masteries, we go 12 Ferocity and 18 Cunning, grabbing Storm Raider Surge as our Keystone Mastery. It's incredibly easy to deal 30% of a champion's maximum health within 2.5 seconds on Ryze. You'll then get 40% movement speed and 75% slow resistance for 3 seconds. This adds some much needed mobility since he is a very immobile champion in teamfights. Now if you're looking for damage instead, you can still go for Thunderlord's Decree. This is a great keystone as well, considering he's able to combo so fast, and it adds some nice burst onto his combo. For our runes, we go 9 greater marks of magic penetration, 9 greater seals of scaling health, 6 greater glyphs of scaling cooldown reduction, 3 greater glyphs of magic resist, and 3 greater quintessences of movement speed. Ryze yet again, very immobile and short range, so the movement speed quints help a ton on Ryze. With the way he itemizes, he kind of struggles picking up CDR, so we get that extra 10% at level 18 to help with that. Of course, since we don't have all of that magic resist, we need to take the scaling health yellow, so we're at least a little bit tanky in that mid lane. Other than that, of course, magic penetration reds, because getting through magic resist is rather important, and this increases your damage by a fair amount. Now if you're somebody who doesn't have movement speed quints, you can of course get away with ability power quints instead, but movement speed is by far the better choice on Ryze, in my opinion. Ryze is a champion who makes great use of the majority of the summoners out there. Flash of course is a requirement on one of your summoners as you don't have a built-in escape. Besides, it can also be great to go super offensive and catch somebody off with your rune prison. Ghost is then my favorite secondary summoner on Ryze as he's not very mobile. This can make positioning for you in team fights much easier and make you much more effective. Cleanse, however, is still a great option. It's great against mid laners with hard CCs like Twisted Fate. Barrier is then a great option against mid laners with predictable burst, such as Zed. Now Ryze does still become a late game monster, so Teleport is still a great option if you are looking to split push. This will allow you to push side lanes fairly often during the game, and you'll still be able to make it to team fights with your Teleport. Finally, if you're looking to just get snowballing, Ignite is still a great option. If you know your enemy opponent's going to be somewhat easy, you may as well take Ignite so you can get easier kills and start snowballing. Ryze's new passive is called Arcane Mastery. Very simply, Ryze's maximum mana is increased by 5% per 100 AP. Since your skills do a portion of damage based on your mana, this just means AP has an even bigger effect on Ryze. Ryze is no longer a get as much mana as you can, so your abilities do more damage. You can get this mana from your AP now. That means items you generally wouldn't get, like Void Staffs and Rabadon's Death Caps and whatnot back in the day, are now very viable on Ryze. There's not a whole lot else to say about Ryze's new passive. I mean, it's awesome, but we'll kind of look more in depth at it in the item build. Next up, however, is your Q, Overload, and this is one of your main ways of doing damage. So for the passive, Ryze's other basic abilities reset Overload's cooldown and generate a rune for 4 seconds up to a maximum of 2. Now this is a very important part of the ability because when we do get to the combos page, a lot of it is based on doing your E and following it by a Q because your E empowers your Q, but your E also resets the cooldown on your Q. Now it's a little hard to explain how exactly this works because runes is an entirely new mechanic on Ryze. So for the activate, it shoots out, dealing magic damage to the first enemy struck and consuming all of his runes. So it's like the old one still, except now there's the whole rune thing. So if you do consume 2 runes, you shield yourself and you get a bunch of movement speed. So generally, we want to have 2 runes before we use this ability, but of course that's not always possible because our W does have a long cooldown. For our Flux portion of this ability, which is based off of our E, Overlord deals increased damage and spreads to all nearby enemies marked with Flux, consuming the mark on all of the targets. And this can deal up to 100% bonus damage at max rank, so that is obviously very important to try to get off as much as possible. And of course, we're going to look at this again at the combo page. Our W acts just like our old one, and it's called Rune Prison. So when you use this ability on a target, it roots them for 1 second and does some damage based on your AP and bonus mana. Now if you do have Flux, however, the Rune Prison's root duration is doubled to 2 seconds. So this is obviously good. Why would you not want your root to be an extra second longer? However, if you're using your Flux, you generally want to get it on your Q so it does a bunch more damage. There are a few situations where you will want to use the root duration Flux if you are getting ganked or something, and we'll talk about that in the combo page yet again. Alright, moving on, our E ability, Spell Flux. So you shoot at an orb at a target enemy, dealing magic damage and marking them with Flux for 3 seconds. Your next basic ability against that target then consumes the mark and does the bonus effects, which we've kind of covered already. However, Spell Flux has its own Flux as well, and it's actually a very important one, especially for farming. So when you use your Flux version, Spell Flux spreads to all nearby enemies, applying its damage and marking them with Flux as well. Enemies that are killed by Spell Flux or while marked with Flux also triggers its bonus effects. The nice thing about the ability as well is it's only got a 2.25 cooldown. So yeah, basically this is the ability you want to use before other ones to make them more powerful. We're going to quickly cover our ultimate ability and then talk about all the ways we can use Spell Flux. So here it is, our new ultimate, Realm Warp. It's basically just a knockoff of Tom Kench's ultimate. You pretty much channel for 2 seconds, make a portal, and anybody by it goes to the target location he's porting to. You can move around and cast spells, which is pretty cool during this ultimate, but it does get cancelled by silence and immobilizing effects. It's also kind of weird that you can only get 2 points in this ultimate, but your overload can get 6. So when I use this ability, I don't generally take my teammates around with me, I kind of just go for flanking opportunities. If some enemy champions are running away from bot lane tower or something because your team just won a trade, you're able to simply teleport behind them and get some free kills. It's a pretty damn good ultimate, but obviously it doesn't have the teamfight utility as his old ultimate, which would just wreck entire teams. However, if you are roaming around looking for flanking opportunities, this can actually get you snowballing really hard in the game and can make you carry games solo. For our ability order, we of course max our ultimate first at 6 and 11 since it only has 2 points. For its high amount of damage, we then max our Q first at 2, 4, 5, 7, 9, and 12. Yes, it has 6 points. Next, we move into our Spell Flux. We take it at 1, 8, 10, 13, and 14 since it's a rather good damage ability as well. Finally, our root skill, Rune Prison, we take it at 3, 15, 16, 17, and 18. We pretty much just grab the 1 rank early on, so we actually have some sort of a crowd control. Alright, so we're finally at that combo page I've talked about a couple times, and your first combo is just your simple wave clear, which is E, E, Q. So this is your basic farming combo. Using your E twice will allow your Spell Flux to bounce onto all of the other minions, and then you can use your Q's Spell Flux ability to clean them all up. Basically, first your fluxed E will spread that spell fluxed onto all the other targets, and the fluxed version of your Q hits anything with spell flux, which will be all the minions. So your max damage harass is a rather long combo. It is Q, E, Q, W, E, Q. So the first Q is there because, well, your E resets your Q anyways, so you may as well shoot out a free Q. You then follow up with an E, so you get Spell Flux on the target, and then follow up with your Q, and assuming your max level, this will do 100% increased damage on that Q. Alright, so that's the first part of that combo. You use a free Q, use your E to reset your Q, and then use the Q to do that empowered damage. Alright, got it. Now if you're on a single target, at this point they're probably going to be on you, so you may as well use a W. This will then lock that target in place for 1 second since it's not empowered. However, next we use our E to put our flux on that target. Follow up with yet another Q doing 100% bonus damage. Now if you remember how runes work, this will also give you your shield and movement speed from that Q. On his Q ability, it's stated that every other ability will give you a rune. So since we did a W and an E before that Q, we have 2 runes, which makes that passive kick in. Now that's our combo. It looks a little complex, but when you put it very simply, all you're doing is empowering your overload as much as possible for that 100% increased damage. When you do need the shield and movement speed, you want to make sure you're using your Q after both your W and E, so you do have 2 runes. Now for our escape combo, it is E, W, Q. Your E will empower your W, which will make the route 2 seconds rather than 1 second, and that Q, since you used your E and W beforehand, will give you that shield and movement speed so you can run away. Very, very good way of escaping. Now, it's not a reliable escape like, say, Ezreal's Arcane Shift or something, but this is pretty much as good as it gets when you don't have an actual escape. Ryze in general struggles against long-range mid laners that do tons of damage. He's relatively weak early on in the game since all he's trying to do is stack up some mana, and things with lots of poke can give him a really tough time. Now of course the champions with the highest percent win rates against him in 6.14 do exactly that. They're champions like Ziggs, Cassiopeia, Xerath, Vel'Koz, and Ahri. All of them have relatively good ranges and can really abuse the short range on Ryze. Now champions that can delete Ryze rather quickly in mid lane are also a pretty good matchup. Champions like Malzahar, Akali, Diana, Veigar, and Annie can all delete Ryze before he can even react. The old Ryze was one of those champions you could pick at any point in the draft as it could match up really well against anything at all, but that's no longer the case in 6.14. He's still a pretty damn good champion, but just don't pick him against stuff that has really high burst or really long range. Early game is pretty much hell for Ryze. Your mana pool is really low and you're just simply not able to do sustained fights. Your damage is also relatively reliant on landing overload, which can be pretty hard in mid lane when people are behind minions. If you're against mid laners with a lot of sustain like Vladimir, you're pretty much never going to push them out of the lane. There's some champions out there that could straight up sit in mid lane all game and not even have to move against you. You pretty much just want to get your tier and catalyst as soon as possible so you get your mana pool stacking and you get some nice sustain from that catalyst. You're a champion who outscales the majority of the mid laners out there, so just pick up as much farm as you can and wait for that portion of the game. In the mid game, your mana problems will pretty much be non-existent since you should have Tear of the Goddess and Rod of Ages. Of course, since you're generally going to have mana, you're going to be able to start contributing a lot more in team fights. You'll want to try to get down your mid lane tower as soon as possible if it's not already down, so you can start roaming the map with your ultimate. Your ultimate's pretty damn good at flanking, so if your bottom or top lane towers are down, try communicating with your team and get some easy flank kills. Other than that, objectives should become a more important part of the game in this phase of the game, so try to roam around the map with your team and get stuff like Dragon, Towers, or even Baron if it's possible. Congratulations, you've made it to the late game, which is a part where Ryze really shines. Teamfights are going to start breaking out all over the map, and this is where you can really start showing the strength of your champion. Your role? Consistent damage. In order to do this, you want to make sure you're positioned correctly so you won't get collapsed on, yet you're in range to actually do damage. You'll pretty much just be doing a ton of damage on the enemy front line with your AD carry. Of course, if they're not worth that time investment and their AD carry is fed, you may want to use your ultimate or just simply run through their team and get onto the AD carry. Now, although you can build somewhat tanky yourself, we do generally go for a high AP build with our new passive, so you'll want to have your tankier teammates soaking the damage and not you. Sit just a little bit back of your team's front line and dish out all of that damage you're known to do. Alright, last but not least, the item build, and we start with a Sapphire Crystal, Refillable Potion, and Warding Totem. The crystal's great because you do scale off of mana, of course, as we know, and you get a larger mana pool. The refillable potion is a great buy because he does need to use a lot of potions to stay sustained in that mid lane, and the refillable is great because you'll be backing pretty often, trust me. For our first buys, we want the Tear, Catalyst, and some normal boots of speed. As previously mentioned, this gives you that much needed mana and some sustain for mid lane. For our core build, we of course get the Rod of Ages first, as it stacks nicely and works perfectly with Ryze, making him a bit tankier in the process. Since we're not going to have to worry about our CDR, we get some Sork Boots to get through any of that early MR. We then get the Archangel's Staff for all of that mana, ability power, and awesome passives. When it finally evolves into a Seraph's Embrace, it has an amazing active that gives us a mana shield and makes us a lot tankier for when champions get on top of us. Now there's a lot of good damage options and defensive options for Ryze. My favorite one, and I see it very popular on other Ryze players, is the Morellonomicon. Great especially on Ryze since he is missing some CDR at this point and it gives you that much needed 20%. Grievous Wounds and everything else that comes with the item are just also fantastic things to have on Ryze. Now if you want damage items that are a bit tanky as well, Abyssal Scepter is great if you need that magic resist, and Ryze is pretty good as well if you're looking to kite and just want a bigger health pool. Of course, the very generic AP mage items, the combo of Rabadon's Deathcap and Void Staff, both fantastic items for both having a lot of AP and magic penetration. My favorite defensive option on Ryze, of course, would be the Zhonya's. Fantastic because it adds a lot of AP, some much needed cooldown reduction yet again, and an amazing active, saving your life in all sorts of different situations. Guardian Angel is also a fantastic pick as well if you are looking to come back to life in those late game teamfights. Now of course you could go a little bit more tanky old school Ryze with the Frozen Heart, Banshee's Veil, or something like a Spirit Visage. They're all fantastic items, but I don't take them too often on Ryze unless we really need a frontliner, or if I have to go top lane as Ryze. Now for our example full build, we of course take our Rod of Ages, Sork Boots, and Seraph's Embrace as they are our core build. Since we only have 10% CDR at this point, I do like to get the Morellonomicon and the Zhonya's for that 30%, making us CDR capped. Then in our build, to get through any of that late game magic resist, we take a Void Staff to get right through it. Ryze is no longer that champion who has one single build. It's hard leaving stuff like the Rabadon's Deathcap out of this build as it does give a lot of mana, and a lot of people do take the Rabadons, but a lot of people don't as well. You'll have to play around with the items yourself, but the example full build is the one I found to work best for me. So that's it guys, this was a longer guide than usual, but Ryze is no longer the smash your head on the keyboard until your teeth falls out type of champion. Now although he's not a top tier champion anymore, he still has a pretty good place in League of Legends in my opinion. He's still a fantastic late game champion and can do some great flanking now with his ultimate. Now if you guys did enjoy the guide, please make sure you like and subscribe as we're going to have lots of League of Legends content coming out in the future, pretty much every day. Of course you can also visit our social media links which will show at the end of the video and in the description of the video. Other than that, thank you guys so much for watching, I really appreciate it, and I hope to see you guys in the next video. Peace.